Just want to clip it on your get it up in the corner there.
Right here?
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah.
There you go. Try to keep it. Thank you. Good. Switch on the top here, and yeah, you can switch. Perfect.
Today we'd like to welcome you to tonight's event themed Personal Transformation and Mindful Work. We appreciate the opportunity to actually host and collaborate with the Office of Alumni Engagement for this event. And it took a while because we planned this series of events actually back in February. And unfortunately, due to the weather, we rescheduled. So we're very happy that we're able to be here today. And I'd like to thank Christy Durrett, Ali Snell, and Sarah Telfer for all their work, their hard work, and help to get us here today. So this evening is going to be a fun conversation, not fun, but very mindful conversation, I should say, facilitated by SNHU's Dr. Leela Sami. And we will welcome today Reverend Seifu Anil Singh-Molares. Amongst us, a Zen Buddhist Priest, Global Executive Leader, Social Entrepreneur, and Woodrow Wilson Fellow. And we will have a wonderful discussion on the teachings of mindfulness. And I will just read a little bit about their bios, just so that we know. So I'll start with Dr. Leela Sami. And Dr. Leila Sami is an assistant professor of marketing at Southern New Hampshire University. She holds a PhD in international business and marketing with a focus on social media marketing. Dr. Sami is also an adjunct instructor at Harvard Extension School and Harvard Summer School, and previously was an assistant professor of digital marketing, managing the Master of Digital Marketing and Analytics program at Aurora University. Her research focuses on global social media marketing, investigating the link between brand image and social media from a global context. With over 10 years of working in the field of social media, Dr. Leela Sami educates small and medium-sized enterprises on aligning their social media goals with their current business objective in her consulting firm, Really Leila, LLC. And to introduce to you today, Reverend Seifu Anil Singh-Molares. He's a global executive manager and with a varied career as a corporate leader at Microsoft and as an international entrepreneur. He currently leads a nonprofit, Spirituals Directors International, SDI, and is a motivational speaker, a Zen priest, and a spiritual director companion. In the past, he has had stints as a journalist, a scholar, a large event planner and director, and a nonprofit expert. He led Microsoft's International Strategic Partner Program as senior director for 12 years, and has started and runs 3 nonprofits, the Preeclampsia Foundation, the Compassionate Action Network, and SDI. Additionally, he has organized major international conferences, helped promising investors value and sell their patents, co-founded a management consulting and international services firm, and advised individuals and groups on how to implement meaningful and lasting changes. Reverend Seifu looks to combine the best practices from the world of business with a commitment to practical, compassionate action. He was born in Holland and raised in Europe and the United States. He's fluent in Spanish, French, and English, and he's a citizen of both the United States and Spain. He feels fortunate with his liberal arts education and cross-cultural upbringing, which helped him hone his skills he uses every single day. A round of applause, please, for our guest today. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good.
So I think we're going to start with a little bit of a meditation. If
Sure.
you're open to that.
I'm open to it, and Normally as a Zen priest, I would have to be in my full robes, but I didn't bring them because they take up too much space in my bags. So I just brought my raksu, which is a symbol of the Buddha's robes and the sign of the infinite of the universe. And because I'm a Zen priest, I'm going to lead you in just a few minutes of Zazen, which is just meditation, breathing meditation. I'm sure there's experienced meditators among you, and so with apologies to those of you who are, I'm going to propose a very simple approach and invite you all to actually sit up in your chairs, not propped against the back, and to root yourselves as well as you can. In Zen, we keep our eyes open and kind of downcast. So we gaze, not stare. You kind of just let your eyes rest naturally and in a position in front of you. And what we're going to do is just breathe in and out, and breathe deeply, breathe mindfully. And the best way to do that, and this is actually a technique that has been handed down for about 1,500 years through the history of Chan and Zen Buddhism in China and Japan, is to count our breaths. So we're going to take deep breaths. We breathe from our hara, our tanden, which is the just below your belly button, the navel area. And you try to catch your breaths as deeply as possible from that spot and back to that spot. You'll breathe through your nose. So you keep your mouth closed and your tongue on the upper palate portion of your mouth. And you're going to take deep breaths. We're going to probably do about 10 or 15 because I don't want to keep, although I'd be happy to meditate for hours, but we're just going to take a few minutes. The counting of breaths has a couple of purposes. One is to help you focus on the breath and to keep you from being distracted by thoughts. The thoughts are going to arise, and that's fine. And what we encourage in Zen is that you not run after your thoughts. So you kind of observe them arise and you observe them fall away. They arise and they fall away. And don't chase after them. And that if you do the counting exercises, if you lose count, just come back to one and start again. And breaths as deep as you can make them, standing up straight, your head straight, like a little cord is pulling your head up, and breathe as deeply as you can from your hara. So we'll do about probably 10, 15 breaths, and we'll go from there. And as you're ready, just gently come back to the room and we'll proceed with the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. I meditate often. That was the first time I've meditated with my eyes open.
Oh, well, there you go.
Before we get started, how many people in here have meditated before?
Oh,
wonderful.
That's great.
That's great. So we're going to get started, and I think we can just start really just learning more about Reverend Seifu and hearing about his journey. So if you wouldn't mind telling us about your journey and
Sure.
what brought you to SNHU today.
Yeah, so I'm not going to repeat what Sophia already told all of you about my bio, except to emphasize a few points. So I'm an international person by design, shall we say. My father is from India, my mother is from Spain, and I was born in Holland and had lived in the UK and India and Spain before settling in Belgium, in Brussels, Belgium, for a few years. Came to this country in 1973, aged 11. And both my parents were United Nations folks, and so I grew up, the rest of my upbringing was in New York City, and I went to the United Nations School in Manhattan. Come from a very staunch Roman Catholic upbringing from my mother's side, being from Spain. But my father was a Hindu, and so had kind of introduction to the varieties of the religious experience from a very early age. We traveled a lot. We traveled broadly. We spent a lot of time in India. We spent a lot of time in other parts of the world. And I've always been very interested in that particular area, philosophy, theology. My graduate degree is in comparative religions from Harvard, and I was going to be a professor, but decided that the commitment required by that particular institution was too much, 12 years on average, and I didn't have the passion for it, nor for university politics. So I took a detour. I ran a language school in Boston called the Boston Language Institute for a couple of years. Because I speak several languages, I had translated my way through grad school, paid for my tuition and expenses that way. And I ended up at Microsoft running a language team. My wife was from Anchorage, Alaska, and she wanted to be closer to her mom who had cancer. So we relocated to Seattle in 1991, and I ended up running, very quickly moving up the ranks at Microsoft to being one of the key managers of international operations for 12 years there. So my theology, religion, English literature, philosophy background metamorphosized into a career in business as a corporate executive. And I lecture broadly and often about that particular topic. So you're certainly free to ask me questions or ask questions about that tonight if you'd like. I left Microsoft in 2003 after 12 years there, ran a number of my own companies, international management consulting, other types of consulting for green technology, working with patents and inventors, and doing a bunch of different things. I've been involved with 3 nonprofits, 2 that we started. My ex-wife and I started the Preeclampsia Foundation, which was funded by one of the very first grants from Bill and Melinda Gates in the year 2000, actually. And then the Compassionate Action Network, as you heard, and now I run Spiritual Directors International, which is a 30-year-old nonprofit group of 6,600 spiritual companions worldwide, which is priests and nuns and psychologists and social workers and lawyers who are focused on helping others come to their own sense of what we in Zen call beyond the beyond, or the universe, or God, or however you might describe that greater force, that higher power. I've been a Woodrow Wilson Fellow for 14 years, which is kind of unusual. But since I'm a failed academic, I love to kind of float in for a week, and before anybody gets too attached to me, I float back out. And so I think this is my 27th university as a Woodrow Wilson Fellow, and I love every engagement. I love being here, and especially love to talk about mindfulness, and so looking forward to a good chat with all of you today.
Excellent, thank you. So let's start with the beginning of your journey to become a Zen Buddhist.
Yep.
And what was your journey like, and then how has that really helped you with your work life and balance, if you can even say that?
Yeah, so I went as an undergraduate, I went to the University of Rochester in upstate New York. And I was a freshman in 1980, and read a book in a freshman preceptorial on world religions called What the Buddha Taught. And this book by a Sri Lankan monk named Walpola Rahula was a revelation to me, but it was more than a revelation, it was a remembrance. As I read the pages and the tenets of Buddhism, I recognized them, I remembered them. And so that's the book that I read immediately following that was called The Three Pillars of Zen by Philip Kaplow, who was one of the pioneer Zen masters in the US, who happened to run the Rochester Zen Center. So when I expressed interest in Zen, my professor, who was one of Kaplow's students, said, well, the Zen Center is just down the road. And so I went there in October or November of 1980, learned how to sit in Zazen, which has been a daily practice now for almost 40 years for me. I became very passionate about Zen practice, about both from a scholarly perspective, kind of devouring every book I could, and really planning to further my studies. I joined up with Edo Shimano Roshi in the Daibozatsu Zendo in the Catskills of New York, and so did a lot of very intense practice in a very intense strand of Zen, Rinzai Zen. And left because I wasn't really ready in my early 20s to pursue that with the kind of rigor that it demanded, and also because there were some problematic issues with Edo Roshi. So I took a detour into academia, and that's I've kept practicing, and about 5 years ago decided that I needed to align with my true purpose, and that's when I became a Zen monk. And all I can tell you about the Zen practice, the meditation practice, is that it has helped me overcome every challenge in my life, every crisis, every major presentation that I've had to make, every anxiety, addiction, or other setback that I've had to just get back to the mat and sit my way through it.
And would you mind sharing someone asked, so I've had the opportunity to have Reverend Seifu in a few of my classes, so I know some of your backstories.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing just your day-to-day life and when you wake up in the morning?
Yes.
And what your practice is?
Sure. So I get up every morning at 4 a.m. and try not to wake my wife, because she doesn't really appreciate being getting wakened at that time, and slip out the door in my robes and go to the Zendo, and we sit from 5 to 6 a.m. Most mornings. I'm the chant leader at the Zendo right now. We go through various posts as part of our training, and then I go from there straight to the office after some tea with my colleagues, my Zen colleagues, and work there for 10 hours a day, and then come home. And I have a family. Most of my kids are gone, but I have 6 kids, and there's still 2 of them at home. And so we cook dinner, and we tend to our lives as a family, and then twice a week I go back to the Zendo afterwards and to take Dokusan or fulfill some other responsibilities. So that's a snapshot of my daily existence. And I tend to go to bed pretty early.
So would you say that you practice mindfulness differently in your professional life versus your personal life? And if you do, how would you?
No, I actually think the practice is similar. It's just paying attention, being alert, being focused, paying attention to what's going on around me. Mindfulness is a lot about anticipation, right? Being a little ahead of the curve. Doing tasks as they need to be done rather than waiting to be prompted to do them. And so you can practice that in any setting, in an airport, with your family, at work, in any situation.
And so these practices, what are some tips and tools or ways that you do practice mindfulness?
Yeah, so the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And, in the world of, I was talking about this earlier in a couple of classes, which is that we tend to make mountains out of molehills. And in all of our lives, both personal and professional. And, in the world of business, any issue can usually be summarized down to a fairly binary equation, which is, go right or go left, yes or no. What's the essential issue that we're dealing with here? And so the Zen training, the mindfulness training helps me hone in on what exactly is the issue before us, what exactly is the issue that I'm tackling, and helps me tackle it efficiently. I'm sure, as all of you who have business pedigrees know that studies show that out of the 40-hour work week, there's peak effectiveness only for 4 to 6 out of those 40 hours. And the rest of the time is distracted thinking, meetings, phone calls, meals, kind of part and parcel of the life of being a business person, but that are not really essential, that are not really key. And so mindfulness practice just helps increase effectiveness and focus. And the same is true of the personal life also, which is, I have 6 kids, 5 boys and 1 girl. And my wife and my daughter, who's 14, the youngest, bam, 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 And it's like, what are you fighting about? Well, she did this. And there's usually some kind of power struggle at that age. And it's like, stop, right? What is it you're really fighting about? And so that's just another example. But and it's not a shortcut. It's basically helps focus in on the core issues.
So how do you feel that you can really separate yourself from those core issues? I know
Yes.
Right. And I know it's challenging sometimes to separate yourself, especially in the workplace when you have something really you've put so much time into, and then it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
How do you deal with those situations?
Yeah, well, so I mean, this is what happens. You become passionate about something, you're very invested in it, and you try to control it, right? It's like, well, you spent 5 years working on this darn thing, and you're not going to let it go, right? You're not going to let it go because if you release your grip even for a nanosecond, it's all going to fall apart. And of course, that's not true. And actually trying to hold it that tightly is counterproductive. And so the teachings of mindfulness and non-attachment in the Buddhist teachings is basically none of this is anywhere near as important as we think it is, right? Most of the issues that confront us in our lives are not as important as we think they are. And it usually takes a shock to the system to remind us of that, right? I mean, I remember, 9/11, and I was working at Microsoft, and we were having team meetings, and that day, actually, it happened that morning, but that day when we arrived, everybody was shell-shocked, like the whole nation, the whole world was shell-shocked. And I think there was a collective realization that the stuff that we were worried about in our daily lives was really meaningless in the face of something like that. And I think that is a central teaching and very helpful to me, which is working hard and working with good intention, but not being overly attached to outcomes because nothing lasts, right? And I don't mean that in a nihilistic way, but the nature of the universe is nothing lasts. Everything is impermanent. And our closest relationships, our achievements, our certificates, our bank accounts, none of that lasts. And so if you take that perspective, you still work hard and you still work with good intention, but you kind of let things flow where they need to flow rather than where you want to control them to.
So one thing you said earlier was that 5 years ago you started on your path to become a Zazen Buddhist monk.
Yeah.
And you said it was your your calling.
Yeah.
Would you mind speaking to that? And how did you know? That's always a question, right?
Well, I think I always knew, and the issue was that I wasn't. That's why I come to schools such as this one, and the chief message that I deliver to students, along with liberal arts, really do provide a very solid foundation to tackle any of life's challenges, is listen to that inner voice, right? The inner voice that speaks to us when we're 17 and 18, where I already knew that I wanted to be a monk, where I already knew that there was something in these teachings that was really calling me. And of course, I did what was, I wanted to succeed, and I wanted to go to a good school, and I wanted to have a big fat bank account, and I wanted to have children, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things, except that they're not ends unto themselves, and there's a deeper purpose. And so after kind of circling around for a few decades, I came to the realization that, and the universe helped me achieve this realization, which is kind of knocking me back. Anytime I tried to go outside of my lane, it would knock me back into the lane. That maybe I should just listen to that voice, and be who I wanted to be, and be who I was meant to be, and flow with that energy. And as soon as I did that, things started to fall into place. And all of the skills that I had acquired in the business world and as an entrepreneur, have direct bearing on what I do every day. So none of that was wasted experience, but it's now focused and aligned with my true purpose.
So could you give some tips to everybody about how to follow their true purpose, or?
Well, just look at yourselves in the mirror, and if one of the students was asking me that this afternoon, she's like, I want to make money, and that's my chief objective in life, and I understand that. Especially in this society. That's how we measure our success, is by our bank accounts in many ways, or many of us do. I certainly did at one point in my life as well. But if you're working at a job you don't enjoy, and it's not really going to matter whether you have 2 homes and 5 cars and more money than you know what to do with in the bank account, you're still not going to be a terribly happy person or a terribly connected person. And so there's balance. It's not an either-or proposition. You have your millions of dollars, but be aligned with your purpose at the same time. And they're not mutually exclusive. So I think that's really what I advocate is balancing all things and doing, the Renaissance. I like the Renaissance ideal. I like to do lots of different things and do them as well as possible. And several things can be done simultaneously too.
Speaking about those several things that you do simultaneously, would you be open to talking about some of the
Yes, of course.
initiatives and the nonprofits that you're part of?
Yeah, so spiritual companionship is a much needed service in today's world. And it's basically listening, right? I mean, you listen, and then every once in a while you say some more, right? and that's really a powerful tool, because most people just want to be heard. They want to be heard and feel listened, and by listening, you acknowledge them. But more than that, by listening without trying to interject solutions, because we're so solution-oriented in our society that we disempower the people who come to us unintentionally by trying to provide them answers. And of course, we're conditioned to do that, rather than say some more and allowing them to kind of unfurl their own understanding of their situation and come up with their own solutions. And that works. That really works. It's hard to stop yourself from, I've got the perfect solution for you, you should do this. But it works much more effectively when, they go, oh, maybe I should try something different. And because it came from within them, that's key. And so I think there's a really important role, especially in a world where there's increasing alienation and increasing disconnection, and othering and tribal responses of various kinds, to increase the lines of communication that connect us. And so I'm very committed to, this is the vehicle, SDI is the vehicle. I'm a Zen priest, but that's a role as well. And it's a robe, and it's a set of historical practices. But the larger purpose of being in community and helping each other, that's an eternal purpose.
Mm-hmm. So I asked you this question Monday.
Yeah.
But we all have, we're talking about work, and we all have those work situations that are tense, and sometimes you try to be compassionate.
Yeah.
And you just can't.
Yeah.
How do you deal with trying to still be compassionate, but not giving up your pride, I guess, the best way to say it?
Yeah. So the first thing is none of us are perfect, and we all make mistakes. All of us do. And so I think one of the most important skills as a leader that we can all have is learning to apologize when we make a mistake. And that is actually kind of counterintuitive, because many leaders are trained never to apologize under any circumstances, never to show that kind of weakness or vulnerability. And in my experience, saying, oh, shoot, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, doesn't detract from your leadership, it actually enhances it. And so, none of us are perfect, that's kind of a given. And we can all be triggered, and we can all have inappropriate responses and get angry and get agitated. And it's just being able to pull back from that and look at ourselves in the mirror that's important. I also, as I mentioned to you, I think yesterday, don't believe that compassion means roll over and play dead, right? In the particular line of Zen that I practice in Rinzai Zen, which is the training that samurais received and that warriors received, compassion can be hard, can be a strong response, an appropriately strong response to an unjust situation or an inappropriate crossing of boundaries. And so compassion can mean screaming. Compassion can mean setting a clear boundary. And it's not just this warm and fuzzy enabling codependent virtue. It can be a harsh response when it's needed. And, we've all, those of us who have kids know, especially if you're raised in an older generation, the whole tough love thing, right? And there's a place for tough love. There's a place and a time for tough love. And it's not for everybody, right? I'm not saying that everybody benefits. You have to kind of adjust to circumstances, but without kind of falling into enabling or being codependent. So I'd say make mistakes and accept them and move on.
One last question before we open it up to the audience.
Yeah.
Did you have a lot of great mentors along the way? And if you did, how did they help you?
Yes, I did. I did have great mentors. I think, in a sense, every person that I meet is a mentor, because you can learn something from anyone. And some of the people who rub us the rawest are actually, in Zen we have one of the sutras says to thank those people in particular who make us the most angry in our lives, because really what they're doing is shining a light on something within ourselves that's reacting to them, and opening the opportunity to kind of tackle whatever that underlying issue. And it's usually, it's the usual suspects. It's childhood trauma, it's defensiveness, or some, overcompensating to protect yourself, or whatever it is. And so those triggers are invitations. And repeat the question one more time, because there was something else I wanted to say. I'm hoping you... How did your mentors help you along the way?
Mm-hmm.
Mentors, yeah. So yes, I'd say the Buddha has been a mentor, the historical Buddha and his teachings, and part of an eternal line. And when I sit with all of those who are going to sit and all of those who have sat, and I'm part of that line. And so very much a mentor to me. But I've also had, professors. I had a philosophy professor. I had, at Microsoft, I had one of my managers was just this wonderfully supportive and demanding person. And she, really kind of helped me navigate through some of those early anxieties and stages in my life and my professional life there. And but these days, I love to be in conversation because I can learn from anybody.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I think we're going to open up to questions. So if anybody has any questions for Reverend Seifu?
Yeah. I think they want to mic you so that you're properly recorded.
Yes, I thank you for your presentation. I recently saw a lecture on YouTube, The Source of All Knowledge, entitled "Addicted to Thinking," and I think I fall into that category. I've lived my entire life in the left brain, with logic and language predominant. Would you speak to the idea of how one taps into that form of truth that does not necessarily involve language or logic?
Yeah, so that's one of the goals of Zen practice is to, we sit as Zen monks. We have these intensive periods of training, these 4 sessions they're called per year, which are 7 or 8 day sessions where we're meditating in one way or another, 17 to 22 hours a day for 7 or 8 days straight. And that kind of intense immersion wakes up other channels. Human beings operate on multiple channels. And the intellectual channel is one of those channels. And as any of us can attest, when you're listening to music, you're not listening with your intellect. You're listening with a different faculty, not just your physical ears, but it's touching some other part of you. When you're running or you're climbing a mountain or you're swimming or doing any number of activities and you have that aha moment, you can put words to it afterwards, and most of us do, but that intuitive connection with something greater is beyond words. Zen itself is transmission beyond words, right? And so the focus of all of this meditation training is to awaken, to open those other channels of awareness, those multiple levels of awareness that coexist with our intellectual capabilities and inform it, and vice versa. Dogen, Kigen, he was probably the most significant Zen master, or one of the most significant in Zen history. It was a Zen priest and a Zen monk and a Zen master, and he wrote a 12-volume encyclopedia about Zen. And so the intellect and the intellectual channels are not mutually exclusive. They inform and they coexist. I mean, Einstein spoke about how some of his greatest insights were intuitive insights, discernments that he then put formulas around, constructs that came to him intuitively that he then put words around. And I'd say, having been trained as a Western philosopher myself, that a lot of the stuff that we write about is kind of writing around an essential, I don't know why Immanuel Kant is coming to my mind now, so I'll banish that from my head right now, but is kind of putting words around experiences. And so I think, music, physical exercise, dance, lots of other ways to experience connecting with another human being on a very intimate level are all things that we are aware of and that show us the way to a non-intellectual apprehension of the world around us.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Seifu. We talked a little bit earlier about purpose, and I know you've addressed it a little bit, but I think we all possess unlimited potential, and we all possess a certain set of gifts, and to unlock those gifts, to unlock that potential, when we're able to do that, I feel like we oftentimes want to share that with others. And, as leaders, and there's a lot of leaders in this room today, as leaders, how do we help others, specifically, younger people? I know you talked about trusting your intuitive heart, but how do we really help shine the light on that and help people unlock that purpose, unlock those gifts, and trust their unlimited potential?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few things. I mean, I always tell the students that I meet with to listen to themselves. I shouldn't say instead of, but in addition to listening to their parents and their professors and others who are trying to guide them to outcomes with every good intention in the world, for them to kind of discern their own agency, right? In high school, I was in the International Baccalaureate program, and I was doing organic chemistry and mathematics, and a lot of that was, I think, in response to suggestions or pressures that were saying, well, you should be a scientist, or you should be a doctor, and that's really not who I was. And so when I woke up to that, I shifted directions. But we unwittingly force people away from their purpose rather than allow them to reveal it, because we want to be helpful, right? I have 6 kids. I want to be helpful. I want you to succeed. But my definition of success and your definition of success are 2 very different things. And doing what you love to do is more important than pleasing me and meeting my expectations. So I think what we can do is just encourage everyone to discern where their true skills and abilities are, and to respect that agency, to respect their agency and to encourage it. And even if it differs from our own. I mean, as a spiritual companion, you know, we have many Roman Catholic nuns as part of STI, and one of the most wise was explaining how someone came to consult with her about having an abortion. And of course, as a Roman Catholic nun, every fiber of her being was telling her, no, 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 don't do that for all of these reasons. But her training as a spiritual director said, okay, say more, right? Allow you to unfurl your own sense of your agency, respecting someone's agency, and so that they can reveal their true purpose to themselves and then reveal that true purpose to the world.
For leaders and managers who are novices to the practice of mindfulness, how would you recommend to begin incorporating mindfulness for their teams and for their employees? Where do you start?
Mindfulness training is as easy as what we just did here for 3 minutes. It's deep breathing. It doesn't require Buddhism or not sanghas or dharmas or anything really. Just breathe deeply for a few minutes every day. And I often, I had a student earlier today saying, I would love to do meditation, but I'm ADD and I can't focus for more than 2 minutes on anything. And I said, oh, good. So you can focus for 2 minutes. It's like, yeah, I can focus for 2 minutes, but not more. So well, start with 2 minutes, and then build up to 3, and then build up to 4. And so mindfulness is a muscle you can develop like any other muscle, and change is something that happens a little bit at a time, right? I don't subscribe to the theory that all change has to be this earth-shaking major change from one morning you wake up and go, that's it, I'm going to change my life, I'm going to quit all my bad habits, like New Year's resolutions. I'm going to do all this stuff and my life is going to be transformed. You're going to fail most of the time if you take that approach, because you're biting off more than you can chew. So nibble at it little by little, nibble at mindfulness little by little, train yourself little by little to pay more attention, to be more still, to be more contemplative. And, time, those 2 minutes, you'll get up to 10 minutes. And 10 minutes may be enough for 10 years. 10 minutes a day is better than none. And for many people, that's actually very, very beneficial, I need to catch my breath. We'll say, okay, calm down, take a deep breath. And there's a reason for that, and there's a physiological reason for that as well. It's well documented that we need to calm our nervous system, and we can do that by mindful breathing. And so, little nibbles at a time.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first one, I'm very curious. You've had so many different experiences, corporate world, nonprofit. The list is long.
Yeah.
How did you manage in a world where, specialization, you should go, be as good and focus in one area? How did you manage to do so many different things? And how did you were able to transition from so many different experiences?
Mm-hmm.
And the second question is about your kids and meditation. I have kids. I'm trying to teach them how to meditate.
Yeah.
And Any tips?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, the first one is, the answer is really easy. I get bored easily. And I also think there's, I always tell my kids that it doesn't really matter which thread they pull on, just keep pulling. And the whole universe will come behind it. And actually, the path will be revealed. So, start working at place X over place Y. Don't worry about it, because if it's the wrong place, that's going to be revealed to you very quickly. And that'll allow you to orient yourself towards the right place for you. So I believe in the Renaissance ideal, and I believe in doing as many things as possible as well as possible, right? I play flamenco guitar, I cook, I have many other practices that I don't have the time to explore at the moment, and so I do them kind of when I can. I'm writing a book. I've been writing a book for 7 years, and I just I haven't had the time to complete it. But I do think we can do more than one thing at a time. And I actually think the more things we do, the more the common threads between them start to reveal, and the more one starts to inform the other, right? And actually, it helps in helping us find where our niche is, right? So I'm good at, I've been doing event planning my whole life, and that comes naturally. And now, if I do event planning around spirituality and religion and mindful practice and spiritual companionship, roads open. I get the speakers that I need. I had the privilege of meeting the Dalai Lama several times in my life and having special conversations with him, because that's my lane of the universe. Zen practice, when I was a young man, I did a lot of martial arts, made me a more effective fighter and made me a more accomplished musician and a more articulate thinker and writer. And so that's just one example. Everything kind of starts to permeate together. You can't do too much, but we can all do more than we think we can. And so concentrating in just one area is we're limiting ourselves. In terms of the kids, my kids are 14 to 33, and they are part of the fastest growing demographic, according to Pew, which is the spiritual but not religious, right? So they're highly allergic to what they perceive as hypocrisy in many of the established religions, but they're spiritually minded. And so you have to kind of respond to them at the level of their own understanding and their own awareness. In Buddhism, we call that upaya, right? Skillful means. Responding at the level of their awareness. And one of my kids followed me into the Zendo. Great. The others are taking other paths into a couple of them are musicians, and so they connect through music. So again, it's about respecting their agency and letting them decide for themselves how they want to express their spirituality. That'd be my advice.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Mariama. I'm a SNHU international student. And as an international student, I have to go through meeting a lot of people telling me here that I have to speak and express myself. While back home, most of the time, they tell me, you have to listen to your elders and do what they tell you. And with everything going on, I'm also told that I have to find my purpose and go for it. How do I find the right balance? Find a way to be balanced enough to hear everything I'm told and still find my purpose and be myself. Yeah.
So that's a big challenge. I think that's a challenge that we all experience. Even because we can carry those voices in our head for a lifetime. Even after our parents are dead, we can still be trying to please them, to meet their expectations of us. And so it's very easy to fall into trying to satisfy other people's expectations. And the best practice I can recommend is to take some distance, right? I always said it, and this is a lesson I learned at Microsoft, which is never ever respond in the heat of the moment, right? Somebody made you really angry and you're just gonna let it rip. And you're gonna regret it. 9 times out of 10, you're gonna regret it. Wait until the next morning and then respond. And your response is always gonna be different the next day, always. Because you've had time to process, you've had time to digest, and you've had time to investigate your own motivations, your own intention, and that of the other person. So breathe deeply, be patient, find moments of stillness and contemplation, and process, and then see if what you're being told, what's being asked of you, resonates with you. And if it resonates, fine, then you go forward. And if it doesn't resonate, you politely say thank you for your feedback, and go on your merry way. I know that's easier said than done, but it does work, and there are certain practices that help you. But being patient and not reactive, not reacting to circumstances constantly, is a big help.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Reverend Seifu. We have one last request.
So my name's Chrissy. I'm part of the alumni engagement team. And first, I just really want to thank you both very much for this conversation, and thank our guests here for leading us through this. Well, we passed out a postcard for you, a note paper, before you came in. Hopefully you all got one and a pen. What we thought we'd like to have you do is perhaps take a moment and reflect on the time we've spent together this evening, and perhaps write yourself an intention, something that you'd like to be able to focus on, something that maybe came to mind in listening to the conversation this evening. Put it in the envelope, put your address on it, and then turn them in at the table when you leave this evening. We'll send you some mail in a week or so and remind you of the intention you made yourself, and hope that you might be able to continue or begin a practice of mindfulness. I know on my own ledge in my office, I have a piece of tin art that says breathe. That most basic thing that sometimes I remember, like my shoulders are up to here, and I'm trying to think when's the last time I actually took a breath. So think of yourself, your situation. Take the time to do that. Give yourself that gift. Feel free to stay after a little bit and talk with our speakers this evening. There continue to be some refreshments. We do appreciate you participating in this evening's program. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.